Hello, everybody, and welcome back for Legacy Leadership, Wisdom of the Apostle Paul. We are on day 9 of this 30-day devotional, and today we'll be looking at the devotional title, Legacy Leaders Develop Other Leaders. So just a reminder, we're about 2 weeks away from our kickoff of summer training and development, the in-person style. I'm looking forward to having you all over to my house 2 weeks from tomorrow, Wednesday, and we will dive into some of the best practices and experiences that we all have as coaches, good, bad, and ugly. Come together, share those things, and then putting together some content for us to digest together and think of applications and ways we can and go and apply those lessons throughout the weeks to come. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's about 2 weeks out. As you know, I've invited most of you to the Global Leadership Summit in August. This takes place in Chicago, but they simulcast it. I think this year they're up to over 600 multi-sites in something like 300 countries or something. Crazy numbers, and I know I definitely chopped up those stats pretty bad. But we'll get the facts for you, and you'll see it's a pretty cool multi-site event. We're going to be attending at Central Christian Mesa campus, and that's August 10th and 11th. And I believe the pricing is going to go up at midnight tonight. If you do want to go to that conference and you don't already have the website for the discounted tickets, just go to betterarizona.com and register for the GLS Global Leadership Summit on that website. So that August date will be the culmination of our training and development, and I'm very, very excited to share that experience with a lot of you. All right, let's get going on our devotional here. Again, my goal is to just provide you an audio file of me reading this devotional. I like to stop, pause, and reflect as things strike me, and I want to try to open up some of this for us to apply, but also for us to reflect on some of the things that we're doing right and some of the things that we're not doing correct, that we can improve a little bit, share with each other in the Facebook forum. If you've got feedback, we are super excited to have those conversations and keep the dialogue going. So let's get started. Legacy leaders develop other leaders. The highest level of leadership occurs when a leader teaches his or her followers to live successfully without them. Legacy leaders teach others how to lead themselves. But this doesn't happen immediately. It is an intentional process that takes time. Paul used a 4-phase approach to develop his protege, Timothy. This provides a model for our approach to developing those around us. I'm just going to say this right now. On day 9, we are looking at a devotional today that is absolutely fundamental to neighborhood coaching, and I believe the assistant coach model, where not only do we have neighborhood coaches, but we have at least one neighborhood coach who's an assistant coach who's coming under the head coach as the protege, as the apprentice, and they will be learning under that head coach. So if you don't already have a designated assistant coach, then we will be talking a lot more about that. But this is a perfect kickoff to the topic of what do I have to do? What is the plan that I should put in place? What is the model that I should use to approach this whole thing of discipling and developing someone in my group to potentially take the next step someday to coach their own group? So let's look at this 4-phase approach, and I think I'll stop and pause and try to reflect on how this applies, how I've seen it apply in neighborhood groups where there are coaches and assistant coaches. Phase 1 is watch me. While Timothy was still young and immature in his faith, Paul asked him to join him on his mission trips and simply observe. Paul selected Timothy to accompany him on his ministry journeys because he had a good reputation among the believers in Lystra. And that's out of Acts 16, verses 1 through 3. So here we are in phase 1. Timothy is still young and immature in his faith. So he's a relatively new believer. So what's interesting is even though someone's a new believer, we can intentionally seek out a relationship with that person, and given the right relationship and the right time, we can absolutely develop that person to lead as well. So the first phase is watch me, come alongside me, observe me, shadow me, just kind of mirror me. And if you have someone in your group that you have a relationship with, that you maybe have talked a little bit about coaching, or maybe not, maybe you talk to somebody and you find out that they in fact are a leader at work, they're a leader in the marketplace, they hold down some sort of positional power as a leadership position, so they have some of the bones. And maybe you say, you know what, come alongside me. Watch how I'm doing this neighborhood coach thing. Give me your feedback. I know you lead teams in the marketplace. I love your feedback. But also, I want to model to you what neighborhood coaching looks like and get you exposed to that. So phase 1, watch me. Phase 2, do it with me. It wasn't long before Timothy was not just accompanying Paul, but was actually ministering with him in the cities outside of Jerusalem. Acts 16, verse 4. Paul refers to working with Timothy in the opening greetings of 6 of his letters: 2 Corinthians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and Philemon. So phase 2, do it with me. This is where you have an assistant coach who's designated, you're working with them, and you have a neighborhood group meeting at your house or at the host's house, and you've actually turned over the agenda to your assistant coach. They're going to run through the curriculum, they're going to run through the discussion, and they're going to lead maybe a portion of the questions. Perhaps they're answering some of the fundamentals for the study, or perhaps they're leading some of the Bible study during your study. So phase 2, do it with me. They're coming alongside you in the neighborhood group curriculum and teaching, or I should say facilitating with you, the head coach. Phase 3 is you do it, I watch. During the next phase of Timothy's development, Paul would often send him on specific tasks. Philippians 2, verse 19. These can be viewed as developmental assignments designed to develop Timothy's ability to work independently. When he returned, Paul would provide a constructive review and critique. So this is there's a couple ways this goes on. For me, I had a couple of folks in our neighborhood group who I asked to fill in while I was absent from group. I didn't want to cancel the group just because I was traveling for work. And so I had them actually lead the lesson. I wasn't even around, so they did it and others watched and kind of reported back to me all positive things. But there was absolutely a review. There was certainly some good things that came out of that. But this is a little bit of a transitional period where you're actually letting that assistant coach 100% facilitate a meeting that maybe you're not even in. And another good example of this is in our Eastmark neighborhood group. Bob, you've done a great job of filling in for Ryan when he's been out sick, or I think he was out a couple other times, maybe taking someone. Oh yeah, he was with Doug over at Starting Point, and you were able to lead the neighborhood group, go through the curriculum, go through the question and answers, and facilitate that conversation. And I know, because I experienced it at least one of the times, that discussion and dialogue was very, very impactful. So this is a great phase where the assistant coach can be facilitating while the head coach is hands off and kind of in the evaluation mode. So that's phase 3. Of course, the last step, hands off now. Phase 4, you do it on your own. Finally, Paul left Timothy to pastor the church in Ephesus. 1 Timothy 1, verse 3. When Timothy became the leader of that church, Paul encouraged him to perpetuate the legacy logic process he himself had modeled. Timothy was an example for others. Here we go. So, you've been an assistant coach, you've come up under a head coach, you've led some groups, you've worked with the head coach, You've gone through some sort of a discipleship process with that head coach. Now your neighborhood group has reached the point in which possibly you're ready to multiply. And all that means is the original head coach keeps a small group, and the assistant coach takes the majority of the group and runs with it. Perhaps there's a roster split, but there's a couple ways that you can multiply the group. But in fact, this is the phase where you do send off that leader to go and lead their own group. Now, I would be remiss if I would tell you that that was how it should go, that you would just multiply and go off and start your own group. I would say that the only way that I would advise you to do that as an assistant coach, being, call it promoted to head coach, if you will, the only way that I would do that, and this is my advice, is if you seek an assistant coach out of that original group that you're going to lead, seek an assistant coach that will go down the path with you from day one. Don't even multiply your group as an assistant coach unless you too have your own assistant coach already built in. What we're doing is we are modeling this method. We're modeling this legacy logic process where not only am I going to lead and I'm going to lead someone as an apprentice, but as that person goes off and to lead their own, I'm going to encourage them to find an apprentice so that they can then pass on the leadership torch from the legacy logic perspective here. So that's it. Phase 4, you do it. You're on your own. But not only are you on your own, but you're also leading with some sort of an understudy, an apprentice, or in our language, an assistant coach. So those are the 4 steps. And I think those are super useful. And I love it around the conversation of the assistant coach. Because in my 2 years of doing this, almost 3, I've had a revelation and a clarity over the last year that some of our healthiest groups, I believe, will be born out of the assistant coach model. And I think from a sustainment perspective, to keep us from getting burnt out, we really have to infuse this idea of assistant coaching so that we can A, grow other leaders, and B, provide built-in delegation so that we are not strapped with the responsibility of 100% of my effort is going into leading my group. If it's you, an assistant coach, that's two calendars that you can manage, 2 people that can go off and make intentional relationships with your neighborhood group members, 2 people who can work on this life mission plan together in harmony so that you guys can actually make a huge impact. So keep that in mind as we progress through this training and development session. This discussion is going to be a big focus during our summer sessions face-to-face. Let's continue on. Let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example of those who believe. 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. Just as Paul had done, Timothy was to be intentional about his influence. This influence was to be intentional, comprehensive, full-on effort. In speech, what you say and how you say it. In life, the quality of your daily routines. In love, the quality of personal relationships. In faith, the way you love God. And lastly, in the purity of your moral life. Not only was Timothy to live a life that was worthy of imitation, he was to continue the process of intentional investment in others. Paul had invested deeply in Timothy, and now Timothy was to invest himself in others. So as head coaches, we pour in assistant coaches so that once they grow in that model, they can go off, lead their neighborhood group members, and bring an assistant coach up at the same time. These things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. 2 Timothy 2, verse 2. There are 3 generations of leadership development indicated in this passage. The first is Paul's leadership of Timothy. The next is Timothy's teaching of faithful men. And then these faithful men will teach others. That is a perfect snapshot of this legacy logic. And I would just like to pause and reflect for a moment that we are not doing this purely as a numbers game. We are not doing this purely because it's a quantity thing, that we want to crank out 100 leaders by the end of the year. While it may be good to have metrics and goals like that, we can pause and reflect that the reason why we pour in and develop people is so that they can go develop others as well. When you see the potential in someone else and you speak into their life and help them unlock that potential, it's so that it can better their life, and ultimately they will better the life of someone that possibly they're leading. So this isn't a numbers game. This isn't purely quantitative. This is real impact, real life change through intentional relationship. And then this ongoing process of legacy logic says that you're always pouring into someone who has the capability to grow into someone who can then pour into somebody. So keep that in mind. It requires some foresight, maybe a little intuition, and a ton of prayer. Ask God to have the right people come into your life. Pray that the people you're leading, that God would reveal those who have either a natural leadership ability or a passion to lead in the kingdom, and pray about it. Ask God to reveal those people and to point you in the direction of who you need to be investing in, who do you need to be reaching out to create an intentional relationship within the context of your neighborhood group. Let's wrap up here. Paul's development of Timothy reflects the intentional investment in others that characterizes a legacy leader. The concept of legacy is clearly present here. Legacy leaders have an impact now and for generations to come. I think that is a powerful statement. Legacy leaders have an impact now and for generations to come. So it's not just a flash in the pan. It's not just one quick hit of maybe growing one leader, but it's this ongoing process of helping folks make an impact now and for generations to come. All right, let's reflect and act on these questions. You can do this in the forum. You can do this in your journal. I highly recommend, if you are keeping this in a journal, keep them all organized so that when we come together in a couple of weeks, you can pull out some of the notes if you have them. Any questions, feel free to send them in to me directly, or feel free to send them into the Facebook forum or email. Reflect and act on these questions. Number 1, think of a leader who had a lasting impact on you personally. 2, how do you describe the impact they had on you? 3, what did this leader do to leave his or her mark on you? 4, how might your life be different if your life had not intersected with that leader? And 5, I encourage you to express gratitude to those who have invested in you. First, thank God for placing them in your life. Then send him or her a card or express a letter of gratitude. Send a letter or something to express your gratitude. Or schedule a lunch or dinner to thank them personally. So there's 5 things that can help you reflect and act on this section where we just really wrapped up this whole idea of not only do legacy leaders have an impact now, but for generations to come. Really getting excited to meet with you guys face to face in a couple weeks. Until then, really stay focused on your legacy leadership journey here. And as we get closer, we'll talk about some topics, and I'll be seeking out some questions from you guys. And I've got a couple surveys that I have to kind of get me some background data, and just trying to put together the best content I can so that our summer together is as impactful as possible. Thank you, everyone, for all that you're doing. Every moment that you take to invest in yourself and invest in someone else really has a kingdom impact. And I love you all for making the sacrifice for doing this, and look forward to tomorrow, day 10 of our legacy leadership journey. Bye for now.